Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Davis, and appreciate you all being here with me today. Um, Please bear with me. This is my first time streaming ever, so I'm very new to this, and just bear with me if I make any screw ups here. So, with that said, I just wanted to make sure that I let everyone know that this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while now, because I think there's a conversation that's really not happening publicly, at least not in the mainstream. A lot of people are struggling right now in the job market, especially those dealing with long-term unemployment. But most of that is that a lot of people aren't really feeling open about talking about it. And so that's what this platform is for. I want it to be an open conversation for people to to share their real experiences, real conversations with no fluff. And today I'm joined by someone who actually inspired me to get this started. And I'm pleased to introduce her now. Just give me a moment to add her. Hello, Jillian. How are you doing? I'm well. Let me make sure I have the audio here working for you. Just a moment. Want to make sure I hear you properly. Let's see. All right. Oh, sorry. All right. Are you able to hear me okay? All right. Great. Great. Okay. So just to get started, if you don't mind, let me actually start recording here. And let me ask you, please, that really what I wanted to share with everyone else is, your experience. You're the one that actually inspired me to get this whole live stream started, to be honest with you. And so with that, I'm really excited to have you here. And one of the things that, I really got me excited about this was you just being able to share your experience openly. I know that you recently acquired new employment, so congratulations on that. I want to make sure I congratulate you, because I know it's very difficult out there for everyone. And with that, if you don't mind telling me how you got started, just sharing your experience and sharing your content, and what really inspired you to kind of get started in this. Jillian, sorry, just one moment. I'm getting word that you can't, I can't hear you. So let me make some adjustments here. Just bear with me one moment. I apologize for that. I'm still new to this, so just give me one moment. Let me see if I can fix our audio here. So just just a moment. Let's see. Let me see here. Kick. Oops. Move. All right. I think I might have it corrected now. Can you speak a little bit? I'm sorry. So sorry. Dang it. Still a novice at this. Okay. Audio, mic. All right. All right. All right. Can you hear me now? Shoot, I still cannot hear you, and I don't know why.
What about now?
Perfect.
Okay.
Great.
I disconnected my mic. I think that that's probably better.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Let's get restarted.
Okay.
All right. Do you mind restarting your intro?
No problem. So, I'm Jillian O'Malley. About, let's see, in November 2024, I was laid off from the company that I was at. I had been there for 7.5 years. And I was working for a recruitment marketing talent brand agency. So, working with companies on how to sell and market themselves as employers to job seekers and candidates, as opposed to, how to brand and sell their products to consumers. And, you know, I went through 16 months of unemployment. I just landed a full-time job 2.5 weeks ago. And so basically, what I was kind of going through in that period of time was I've been building up a consultancy as well. So doing fractional employer brand lead work and brand work for companies and personal brand for individuals. And I was doing all the things that they keep telling us to do, which is, make yourself very marketable, um, talk about your thought leadership, talk about the things that you offer, basically look as like shiny and pretty as you possibly can to the powers that be so that you secure the kind of work that you need so that you're showing up in front of recruiters. And I applied for, I think my final count by the time I signed an offer letter was 713 jobs. And I'm very discerning. I don't do like spray and pray kind of applying. I'm like very discerning to make sure that I align as best as possible with the experience that's requested. So that's how many I went through. And I was doing everything that they tell you to do. And in November of last year, so right when I hit a year unemployed, I finally went, okay, forget it. We're trying a new tactic. We are not going to make ourselves generally palatable anymore. We're going to talk about what's really happening. We're going to talk about what this job market is genuinely like. We are going to shift the focus away from, oh, individual job seekers are having a hard time because they just suck at applying and they just suck at interviewing. And we're going to talk about the fact that the system is so broken that no one can secure a job because one, there aren't a lot of jobs out there. And two, the way that everything is set up now, it's incredibly hard to just get in front of a human being that might actually hire you. So I started talking very openly and honestly about what this market is like. And I used it as an experiment to what would happen if I build a personal brand for myself that is way more rooted in who I am as a human as opposed to the things that I can do. Those are still sprinkled in. My expertise, my experience is all still there, but it's way more rooted in just how I show up as a person. Um, and the experience was really interesting because, on the one hand, a lot of people who actually know me and people who don't know me were reaching out going like, oh my God, you're crashing out. You are losing your mind on social media, on LinkedIn and TikTok. And clearly you're just struggling. And I was like, nope, this is all very strategic. This is all very intentional. But the huge response to it has been job seekers feeling very, very seen because I think we've been gaslighting people for a while now about what this experience is really like in this job market today. Recruiters have been, some of them feel a little bit called out, some of them feel a little humanized because I'm very deliberate about the fact that I understand both sides. I came from the recruitment marketing world and I was a job seeker in this job market. So I feel like I have a very unique vantage point of understanding why it's a problem across the board. And I mean, one of the great things is the job that I was able to secure came by way of all of this content. Someone who had seen what I was putting out there, felt very seen in their own job search, and said, look, I just got a job here. I think you would be a great fit for one of these roles that's also open. Um, but ultimately, a lot of my goal in this has been to really ensure that we're being very, very honest about what is going on right now. We can't keep relying on sort of this, you know, toxic positivity. Let's be really quiet. Let's not say the uncomfortable part out loud for fear of damaging our own reputations. I'm like, no, no, no. Damage your reputation. Not because it's going to damage it, but because leaning into your humanity is the best possible thing that you can do right now to try and change something for yourself.
I
I
I
I
certainly
certainly
relate to
relate to
that.
that.
Um,
Um,
and that's
and
why
that's
I
why I
wanted to have
wanted to
you
have
on,
you
is
on, is
because,
because,
when I
when I
first
first
discovered your
discovered your
content,
content,
it was
it was
absolutely
absolutely
relatable
relatable
to
to
everything
everything
that you're
that you're
describing. And
describing. And
so,
so,
with that,
with that,
everybody
every
going
going
through the
through the
constant,
constant,
applying and
and
even the
even the
experience of
experience
going
of
through the
going through
interview
the interview
process,
process,
going
going
through,
through,
with
with
great
great
intentions,
intentions,
preparing for
preparing
each
for each
interview,
interview,
being
being
honest
honest
and feeling
and feeling
nervous
nervous
about
about
the next
the next
step
step
and trying to
and trying to
follow up
follow up
and
and
doing all the
doing
things
all
that
the things that
are
you know
supposed
are
to be the
supposed
right
to be the
thing, but
right thing,
still
still
not
not
amounting to
amounting to
anything
anything
or being
or being
ghosted at the
ghosted at
end
the end of that
of that
of that
process and
process
feeling
and
like
feeling
it
like
was
it
just a
was
waste
just
of
a waste of
time. And
time,
then
and then
all of
all of
the
the
miscellaneous
miscellaneous
nonsense
nonsense
around that
around
when you
that
feel
when you
like
feel
even
like
though,
even
okay,
though
this
this
might be
is
a
might
great
be a great
opportunity for me.
opportunity for me.
I've gone
I've
through,
gone through
4 or 5 interviews. I did
I
my
did my
presentation, I did
presentation, I did
everything, and
everything,
then
and then
it's
it's
like,
like,
okay,
okay,
and candidly,
candidly,
I
I
recognize for
recognize for
myself,
myself,
I may not
I may
be the
not
most
be the most
experienced. I
experienced.
may
I
not,
may not,
I know
I know that there's
I've heard
I've heard
stories from
stories
a lot
of
of
a
people
lot
that
of
are
people that
way
are
more
way more
experienced than
experienced
I
than
am, that
I
have
am, that
been,
have been,
executive level
executive level
people and are
people and are
still
still
experiencing the
experiencing
same
the same
types of
types of
things.
things.
So,
So,
and then
and then
knowing that,
knowing
and
that,
especially in
especially
our
in our
industry,
industry,
I'm in
I'm in
marketing as
marketing as
well.
well.
And so
And
I
so
know
I
that
know
there's
that there's
been
been
a
a
lot of
lot of
layoffs
layoffs
around,
around,
agency
agency
world
world
and in our
in our
industry as
industry
a
as a
whole. And
whole. And
so
so
knowing
knowing
that
that
there's
there's
only a
only a
finite
finite
number of
number of
actual
actual
job
job
openings
openings
available.
available.
And then
And
you've
then
got
you've got
all these
all these
people,
people,
whether
whether
you're
you're
competitive
competitive
people that
people that
are,
are,
competing for the
competing for the
same
same
number of
number of
jobs. And
jobs.
then
And
out
then out
there,
there,
there's
there's
this
this
frustration like,
frustration
okay,
like, okay,
am I even
even
able to get
able
my
to get
foot
my
in the
foot
door?
in the
Am I
door? Am
even
I even
able to get
able to get
myself
myself
seen by
seen by
somebody
somebody
who's,
who's,
um, you know, able to
able
make
to
a
make a
decision on
decision on
something? And
something? And
then
then
when you
when
do
you
get
do
that
get that
opportunity, it
opportunity, it
feels
feels
like,
like,
okay,
okay,
I'm going to put
I'm
my
going to put
best
my
foot
best foot
forward. I'm
forward.
going
I'm
to do
going to do
everything I
everything I
can
can
to,
to,
get
get
this
this
opportunity.
opportunity.
And,
And
knowing
knowing
that
that
there's a
there's a
high
high
level of
level of
competition out
competition
there.
out there.
And then
And
there's
then there's
also the
also the
factors
factors
of,
of,
and
and
this is
this
some of
is
the
some of the
aspects that
aspects that
really I
really I
wanted
wanted
to
to
dive in a
dive
little
in a little
deeper with
deeper
you
with you
about.
about.
Is
Is
one of the
one
things
of the things
that
that
stood out
stood
to me
out to
that
me
you
when you
spoke
spoke
about
about
was
was
the
the
competition
competition
between,
between,
it's almost
it's
like
almost like
hiring
hiring
managers
managers
versus
versus
job
job
seekers.
seekers.
And
And
the
the
battle
battle
between the two,
between the two,
because I
because I
recognize,
recognize,
I want
I
this to
wanted
be
this
an
to be
open
an open
space
space
that we can
that we
speak
can
to
speak
both
to both
sides of
sides
the
of
fence.
the fence.
Because I
Because I
know
know
on the other
on the other
side, there's
side,
got
there's
to
got to
be,
be,
I was just
I was
talking
just
to
talking
one
to
of my
one of
good
my good
friends,
friends,
there's got
there's
to be,
got to be,
frustration on the
frustration on
other
the
end
other
from
end from
hiring
hiring
managers
managers
getting
getting
floods and
floods and
floods
floods
of
of
applications,
applications,
trying to
trying to
verify these
verify
are
these are
actually
actually
real
real
applications
applications
on the one
on the
hand,
one
and
hand, and
then,
then, you
how
know,
to,
how to,
get the
get
best
the best
person
person
for for the
for the
opportunity that they
opportunity that
have
they have
available, knowing
available,
that
knowing
there's
that
only
there's
one
only one
opportunity
opportunity
for
for
these
these
hundreds of
hundreds of
applications that they
applications that they
receive. And
receive. And
so
so
I want you
I
to
want you
speak
to
on
speak
that,
on
if you
that if
can,
you
a
can
little
a
bit
little bit
about,
about,
the
the
competitiveness,
competitiveness,
the other
the other
side of the
side of the
fence,
fence,
and the
the
aspects of
aspects of
AI
AI
that
that
really
really
we can't
we
really
can't really
control. And,
control. And,
we're using
using
AI to
AI to
apply
apply
and try to
and
put
try to
our
put
best
our best
application
application
forward, but
forward, but
also,
also,
there's these
there's these
filters that we're
filters that
trying
we're
to get
trying to get
past
past
just to get
our
ourselves seen.
self esteem.
Would you
Yeah.
mind
Would you
speaking
mind
on
speaking
that?
on that? Yeah, absolutely. To me, like one of the best analogies you can think of for what this experience is like on both ends, right? You have the job seeker on one side of a door. You have the recruiter or the hiring manager on the other side of the door. The job seeker is throwing like grains of rice at the door trying to get one through the keyhole to the recruiter. They're over there trying to catch rice. And basically, what's happening is like, if you think about it that way, because some people talk about, oh, it's a needle in a haystack. I'm like, no, no, no. You're just like throwing stuff at a door, trying to fit it through this one entry point because you're just being blocked by filters, by AI, by deprioritization. And, one of the things to me that we have to be really honest about when it comes to, we pretty much all apply through ATS systems. Something like 75% of companies use an ATS. So by and large, unless you're applying to a little mom and pop company, you're going through a Workday, you're going through an iCIMS, you're going through a Greenhouse, something like that. If it hasn't been set up properly, which a lot of them aren't, not through any kind of, a human just being incapable of doing their job, but the fact that they're clunky and they're just not really optimized for streamlining and connecting the experience between a candidate and a recruiter. So it's not set up properly. So you're getting blocked for random things, your keywords not matching perfectly, or your keywords matching a little too perfectly, and the recruiter seeing it and flagging it mentally as something that's been AI generated. And then what you're also up against is, yes, this is an insane job market in terms of there are more job seekers than jobs available. But one of the big things that recruiters are seeing is the sheer volume of applications that they're getting. And there's a couple things that are happening with that because we are not necessarily at the point where there are 500 job seekers to one individual job in terms of like who's unemployed versus what's available. But you're hearing that a lot, people posting a job and in 48 hours, they're getting 500 applications. What a lot of that is one of two things, and both of them are centered around AI. One is the use of something that like is kind of colloquially referred to as lazy apply, which is using agentic AI to just spray out your resume and apply to as many jobs as possible. Where you've set up an agent that's applying to 100 jobs a day for you. There are not 100 jobs in a single day that you are qualified for. So it's just applying to anything that's open, whether or not you're a fit. And a lot of people are using that because they are trying to maximize their time. Now, that's probably not very useful because regardless, you're still only going to get through on what you're going to get through. But the recruiters are getting that volume. I was talking to someone that I've been working with who works in the healthcare space. They're trying to hire a lab tech, right? And they said, we keep getting all these forklift drivers applying. I don't understand why we're getting so many forklift drivers applying. And I was like, those are people using lazy apply. It's just it's like matching random keywords and saying like, sure, let's apply to this. Like probably the technician kind of keywords. So you have that. Those people are really watering down the actual qualified folks from getting through. The other thing that you're experiencing is that there are applications that are coming through that are not connected to a human being. So the same way that like as job seekers, because I'm sure, Erin, you've experienced this, you apply to a job and you realize, oh my God, that was a fake job that's just mining my data because now I'm getting 20 robocalls a day because I applied to this job that doesn't actually exist. The same thing is happening on the opposite side. So bad faith players are putting out fake applicants as a way to try, in the most nefarious sense, it's a way to try and infiltrate HRIS systems, tech systems. It's a way to hack, basically. Uh, Sometimes I genuinely think a lot of this is people who just want to create chaos in the world and don't really have an end goal in place. But I've talked to recruiters who say, they get an application and it seems like a person who's perfectly qualified for the role. So then they send them an invite to an interview, and all of a sudden they're like, I am sitting on an interview with a deep fake. This isn't a real person. So the I would say the nefarious side of like AI is happening in both experiences. The problem is that it's an issue for job seekers on both sides, because it's an issue for job seekers when it's a fake job that you're applying to and now your data is out there. And it's an issue for job seekers on the other side, because your real human application for a job you're qualified for is getting deprioritized and watered down because you're up against 100 fake people.
I've certainly heard of that. And that's, something I was actually talking to somebody else about was, I can imagine being a recruiter and, thinking I've got a great candidate on the other line and it's a deep fake. And, but to that standpoint, earlier this week, I had, a recruiting company reach out to me. And this is a recruiting company I had worked with before that had submitted me for positions before in the past for, temporary positions or contract roles. And for whatever reason they didn't work out, but I actually, at the time, I remember the brand of their company, and I remember speaking with a person, having a contact with them. And recently I was reached out to by about another position, but it was an AI, and they wanted me to interview directly with the AI over the phone. And it just, I couldn't even, it didn't feel right to talk to an AI, by. And I know it was probably recording me or something like that, but I was like, why would you take away just that human interaction? Now I don't even want to go through this process because I'm talking to a computer, and it doesn't even feel natural for me to even try to answer the questions. It doesn't even feel right. And so I've had that experience recently. And with some of the other, when it comes to some of the ATS systems, like you spoke about recently, I can't. I think we could probably go off the deep end and start talking about Workday. When I see Workday now, I don't even bother anymore because it's gotten to the point, and I didn't even realize that they had a class action thing until it was too late, and so I didn't even get a. I, I'm speaking on it because I didn't get a chance to get myself into it. But the reason why is because I know if I go through my Google, my Chrome password, save passwords, I can go through hundreds of Workday passwords. I realized that earlier this week. I was like, how many of these have I actually applied for and never heard anything back? And then I'm wondering what kind of AI filter do they have on there that's just filtering me out completely to where I don't even recall getting somebody to reach out to me from one of my Workday applications.
Yeah, I've applied to hundreds of Workday applications, and I missed the cutoff for the class action lawsuit too, uh, which, the initial response to it was that it was being ageist, that it was automatically kicking out anyone who was 40 and over, and that's me. And so, and I got not a single, yeah, to your point, I think I got a couple odd, like within 30 minutes, kind of auto reject from Workday, but I think the vast majority I've gotten zero, like no response whatsoever. Um, and the way these things are set up is, and this is where sometimes I really encourage recruiters and hiring managers to take some accountability, because we're not blaming them as individuals, but you need to take ownership of what's going on. So, like, for instance, I've gotten into some conversations with recruiters and hiring managers who are like, I don't use any AI in my hiring. And I'm like, well, what's your ATS? And I just ran into this on LinkedIn, someone who was a hiring manager, so not a recruiter, which means they don't really understand the ATS programs, typically speaking. Um, and so he had said, there is no AI in my recruiting whatsoever. And I said, so you realize it's very easy to see what ATS you use. You use an ATS that is marketed as AI first. So, yes, you do. And having to explain the difference, like just because you're not using generative or agentic AI does not mean AI is not a part of the process. And you are using a platform that markets itself as AI is embedded into everything we do. So there you go. Yes, you are. And it's okay. It's okay. You're using the system. You're a hiring manager. You didn't decide what system was being used. You're using the system that's being presented to you by your HR, your talent acquisition team. And this person said, I'm reading every single resume that's coming through. And I said, okay. I said, you're probably reading every single resume you're being given because you said, I read 200 resumes, but then you also said there were 1,000 applies. So 800 of them got deprioritized by the filters that have been set up because that's the way that they work. Is you get a dashboard and it says this is how many people applied, this is how many people require your attention based on the semantic keyword matching that we did, based on the ranking algorithm that we have built in. We decided these 200 deserve your attention and those are the ones you should read. And you're saying, yes, I read all 200. And I was like, good, great, but 1,000 people applied. What about the other 800? You didn't read them, and that's okay. You don't have to, but we have to be honest about the fact that depending on how this was set up, there is a very, very good chance that amongst those 800 are people who were perfectly qualified for the job. Because me personally, I told this story on the Chad and Cheese podcast, which is I applied for a job that I had an employee referral. Like, here's my employee number. You feed it into this system so they know you're tied to me and you're supposed to be prioritized because you're like within the network, right? And it was for a job, it was employer brand director. My previous title was VP of employer brand. Like, it was my job, my resume, the job description just like matched up perfectly. I could have done this job in my sleep. I got rejected within 25 minutes, auto rejected. And I said, that is filters that were set up inappropriately. There is no, this is not me bragging about myself. There is no reason why I shouldn't have at least gotten an interview based on my experience, the job description, and the fact that I had what is considered an in. I had an employee referral, but everything went through an automated system. Depending on how it was set up, I got kicked out. And quite frankly, I shouldn't have been. I should have been seen by a human, and I wasn't.
And that
And
gets
that,
me to the piece of it where, and as a person of color, I get concerned about that part of it too, because there's always that point in the application process where they ask you, and it's like, okay, it says this is not being considered as part of whatever you're considering for, but if I put my race down here, is this going to be automatically filtered out just because of the inherent AI creation that exists, just because it was created by corporations and so forth? This is just, that's what I feel like. I don't know if that's something that is just automatically filtering me out on top of any other type of, like I'm over 40 as well. Is that also part of it? And am I having, should I put the wrong, race, or should I just put, I don't, want to certify what I don't want to answer this question. And I go back and forth battling that every time I try to fill out an application for something I really think I'm I'm qualified for, and that's something that is just a tough battle. Like I don't want to get filtered out automatically just because I picked this, and it's a selection that I have to make a selection for, and that's the part that concerns me as a person of color trying to get through some of these application processes.
I think that is a very, very important conversation we have to be having. And, one of the things that I always really own is like this process has been incredibly difficult for me, you know, and you can go into like what it's like to be a woman in the workplace. At the end of the day, I'm a white woman and like obviously a white woman. I'm not passing for anything else. And what, you know, what is going on, what kind of biases exist, and what of them are sort of baked in, especially when we look back at, right around this time last year, when our own government decided that DEI was no longer important, no longer necessary, let's roll it back. All these corporations, their reaction to it from my eyes were like, oh, thank God we don't have to pretend to care about this anymore. We've seen 600,000 Black women be forced out of the workforce, be forced onto the job market. And, what does this mean? What does bias look like in kind of the age of AI, in the age of automated systems and technology and all of this? And I did, I guess a couple weeks ago now, I did a little bit of a deep dive into, okay, how does all of this work? Because I was really curious too. Like, for instance, for me, I technically speaking have a disability that qualifies as, like, it's always listed on the do you have a disability? Here's what qualifies as a disability. And I've gone through the same process as you, which is like, do I say yes? Do I lie and say no? Do I say I do not wish to answer? How do I answer this question and what effect does that have on me moving forward? And so I was really curious, how does all of this come into play? And the way that these systems are set up, right? So we're going to take Workday again. Workday is just going to be our punching bag here. So they have basically I would say two kind of filing cabinets within the system. They have the filing cabinet that recruiters, talent acquisition folks have access to, which is where your resume is, where your application information is, where your cover letter is. And it's everything up until the point of like your demographic data, your race, your gender, your sexual identity, because a lot of them ask that too, your disability status, your veteran status. So they have access to all of that. And then there's like a firewall. And then there's that information. And all that information goes into a separate file cabinet that recruiters are not supposed to have access to. And, some companies have talked about they've run into issues with this in terms of, imagine a company that's trying to very specifically do like, we want to do an initiative to proactively hire veterans. That's what we're trying to do. We really want to do a proactive hiring of veterans. So we need to know if people are veterans or not when they're going through our apply process. Well, veterans is a protected class, so it goes into this other filing cabinet. And basically what these ATS systems say is like, well, you don't have access to that. As a recruiter, like your HR team does because they use that for demographic data, but like you can't use that as a part of your hiring decisions. And so it becomes like a workaround that you have to do. So that's kind of their positioning. Yes, we collect that data, but it's private and it's secure and it's over here and you don't get to touch it so that you can't be biased. Now, when and that specifically their ATS, the filters, the knockout questions, all of that, their AI systems do not have access to this filing cabinet so that the AI itself can't be biased. Now, when they are testing AI bias, which is something they do on a regular basis, they test it against that data. Now they anonymize it, so they encrypt it in a way that they don't say, here's Aaron Davis's application. Here's all of Aaron Davis's protected class information. Did you, were you engaging in bias? Let's test whether or not Aaron got a role and what we know about Aaron. They're not doing that. Instead, it's, sort of algorithmic. Like, these are the applications that got jobs. These are everyone that applied. Is there a huge disparity between the protected class information of who got hired and who didn't? But there's still AI is still getting access to that data to an extent. And so I kind of describe this once of, it's less a firewall and it's more like a screen. You can kind of see through it. It's not totally connected, but you can see through it. But there is another side of the AI piece that people don't really talk about, where bias can thrive. Because the AI in these systems is built based off of rules and based off of learnings, right? And so if you're building a profile for who is your ideal hire for this role or this company or whatever, and the AI is learning, like, oh, people with this kind of information are the ones that get hired a lot, so let me prioritize other profiles that are similar to this. Well, there are ways that there can be basically like an unconscious bias. And one of the things that I've always thought about specifically is, when you ask for where someone went to college and someone says they went to Howard or they went to Morehouse, HBCUs, right? And if your AI has learned that we don't hire people from those colleges, we don't give them interviews. Instead, we hire people from Princeton, we hire people from Yale, all of this. The AI will learn to deprioritize those people because they're like, yeah, I'm reading through all this data. I know that we never hire folks who went to Howard. So Howard is not something, Howard's going to get deprioritized. Well, now what you've done is you have unconsciously built a bias into it, because who's going to Howard University?
No, that makes perfect sense. And I absolutely, that's, you can see how that concerning and how that can explode easily just amongst, you just gave it a simple example. I'm sure there's a wide range of examples that kind of isolate people in the same form or fashion, to where it's difficult it's difficult to determine, okay, the AI is going to learn on its own, but what kind of information is it learning from? And if it's learning biased information, then it's inherently going to be biased in its decision making. And so with that, you got to really take a step back and say, okay, is this AI helping or hurting our job prospects from, filtering out people that we might want to be included in there? Or, is this just, DEI kind of filtering out itself almost, to where it's not necessary for any type of applicable rules or anything. It kind of does it on its own because that's the way it was set up to learn. And so that's really concerning from my standpoint, to where I can say, okay, there might be some very highly qualified people that go to HBCUs, graduate, and are well decorated, but it doesn't matter because it's already filtered that out before you even got to a person to really evaluate what your skills and experience are. And that I can't imagine, it's got to be a way for people to, get through that and not feel like they're just struggling to, get in front of somebody to show what they're capable of doing. And I can't imagine, you know, having AI even added further onto the process when you get further down the line to say, okay, it's already filtered out, by my experience, by my college. Now I gotta be concerned if it's going to filter me out through my own keywords or whatever is applicable in my application, simply because I'm a part of a certain organization and they don't want you, or you've been a part of different type of groups that you might have on your application as is beneficial, but because it's contextually, framing you in a certain group that's already biased out, it's like, okay, I'm. Is it even worth trying to apply at that point? And that's the part that really concerns me.
Yeah, and I think, the thing that we have to remember is that like our resumes and our profiles, our LinkedIn's, all of this give a lot of information about things that are related to our protected classes. So like for instance, if I belong to a professional women's group, you know, women in brand or something like that, just by me being a part of that group, you already know my gender identity, right? So if that's on my resume, AI can read that and know without even looking at my actual quantitative protected classes information, it's going to know that I'm a woman. And based on the learnings that it has, based on what it's seen from the people who are running the filters, running the setup, and also deciding who gets prioritized and who doesn't, it might see that and be like, well, I know this organization doesn't hire women, so let's deprioritize this person, this resume. And, a lot of the rhetoric that we are hearing online, and I hear it from recruiters and career coaches a lot, not the good ones. There are really, really good recruiters and career coaches out there, and I want to be very clear about that. But the ones that engage in rage bait in order to increase their followership or whatever it might be, a lot of them will talk about how to sanitize your profile and your resume. Usually, what they're talking about is around age bias because that seems to be the one that they think they can get into the least trouble with. It is one thing to tell someone like, "Hey, sanitize your racial profile through your resume. Make sure that no one can determine what your race is by looking at your resume." People would be very understandably up in arms about that. And so they tend to talk about it from like an age place. Don't put your age on your resume. Don't put any indication of what your age could be on your resume. So remove like the year you graduated college from your resume. And I'm very much like, look, on the one hand, I understand what you're saying, which is if these systems are set up to deprioritize you based on your age, if there is ageism built into the tools, then yes, that is a smart thing. And I'm like, you're fighting the wrong battle here. Because why are you, as like someone who's maybe an influencer in the space of hiring, why are you encouraging job seekers to minimize themselves rather than saying, like, you all need to look at these tools, look at the platforms that you're using, look at your own internal bias and understand why would a job seeker need to make themselves appear ageless just to get an interview? Because the other thing is that if the ageism is built, because a lot of them say like it's not just about the tool, it's that people are ageist. And I'm like, okay, well, once I get through and have an interview and you look at my face, you know I'm not 25. If you're asking for 12 years of experience, you have to assume I'm over a certain age to have acquired that number of years. So, what are we talking about here?
That part is the part that is I find very frustrating as somebody who's over 40, because I know a lot of the positions they look for, okay, you need 10 plus years of executive experience, or you need 10 plus years of leadership. Well, it took me a good 5 to 6 years at the bare minimum just to get to the leadership position. And then for me to have 10 years in leadership, that means I've been in the job market for at least 15 years. So now it's like, okay, how old do you really think I am? And you're looking for somebody who's young to have this experience. Or on the other side of it, it's like they're asking for, oh, we want you to have at least 8 years of AI. Well, how long has AI really been around for us to have like 8 years worth of experience? How many people are you really looking for? Like, is that really realistic? As far as some of these things are just brand new. I remember when I first got into the industry of marketing and so forth, and a lot of the entry level roles were looking for 4 or 5 years of experience, and I'm like, this isn't really entry level if I'm just getting started. I'm fresh out of college, or I'm still new to this. And so that's the other frustrating part, is like, okay, make it make sense. It doesn't add up, and that's hard for somebody to kind of get by. And if you're adding filters to it, and you say, okay, somebody might actually have, but you don't want, I don't want to have 3 pages worth of my resume. I'm trying to break it, I'm trying to minimize it as much as possible, but that doesn't necessarily negate my experience from 10 years ago, because that's the foundation that I built on. Before I got into marketing, I was in data, and I did a lot in the finance industry. It may not be relevant, but it's still experience that I learned, experience that I was able to build on top of, that I acquired, skills when it comes to Excel and a lot of the core, skills that you need for any job, when it comes to a corporate position. A lot of these foundational skills are translatable, but I can't show that I have this experience outside of me showing 3 pages worth of my resume, and that's just excessive at this point. So that's the part that's really frustrating. And I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, so I want to respect your time. I know you have an actual job to go back to, so I'm a little jealous of that. But the one last question I have, for the people out there, I want to try to keep this as positive as possible, and I want to ask you, for the people out there who are still in the job market, for people who are still, out there looking and holding out hope, what do you say to the people who are, still trying to navigate this troubling time? What do you have to give them as far as advice, well wishes or whatever, when it comes to staying focused and keeping themselves productive in this trying time?
Yeah, I think the thing that I want to tell people is that you are not crazy. You are not bad at this, and it is not a you problem. It is the market. It is the fact that the systems we're using are broken, they don't serve us anymore, and nothing new has really come up. Because I know from experience how easy it is to, when you're getting to your 100th rejection, to say, there's got to be something wrong with me. It's got to be, I am the common denominator here. You're not. The common denominator is the fact that this is genuinely broken. And I want to assure people that, like, this is not a you issue, no matter how scary and frustrating and panic inducing this process is. Um, some of the big things that I just like to advise people on is focus on, one, getting yourself out there as much as possible, however that needs to look. You know best what you're good at. Start putting that out there into the world. And a piece of advice that I will give you that came from JT O'Donnell, who is an excellent career coach. She runs Work It Daily. But she gave this piece of advice, which is, make sure every single day you are doing something that makes you feel productive. We are, the way we are wired as human beings, we want to be productive. We need to feel productive in order to maintain our own mental health. So, what are the things you can do for yourself that you have control over? Because applying for jobs, trying to secure a job in this job market, feels so outside of your control. So what things can you do that you can control? Well, you can start a Substack for free and you can write an article about something you really, really know about and publish it. You will feel good. You will feel productive. You will feel like you're making steps towards something by doing that. Find the little things that make you feel like you've accomplished something in your day. And just having that will push you through. Even if it's not something that you accomplish that lands you that full time gig, this sense of accomplishment will fuel you to the next day.
I really appreciate that, and that's part of the reason why I started this conversation. So with that, I want to say how grateful I am to have you on here, and I learned quite a bit from you today, and so I really appreciate you just taking the time out of your day to meet with me, have this discussion, and I hope this is the first of many. To be honest with you, I want to be able to speak with people on both sides of the fence. I want to speak with hiring managers. I want to speak with recruiters. I want to talk with job seekers who are also dealing with this for an extended period. I think it's a conversation we need to continue to have. And so, with that, I'll give you your time back. But I want to say thank you again for having this discussion with me. I really appreciate it.